Hey everybody, welcome back to the Joe Rockstar channel, and on today's video I'd like to talk about the hype surrounding Honda's new entry into the dual sport market, the CRF 450L. Alright, so if you're not familiar with my earlier videos, some of you probably don't know that I once owned and still own a Honda CRF 250L. And I was extremely disappointed with its lack of power, heavy weight, non-adjustable suspension, and just all-around anemic performance.
Listen to that. Listen to that throttle response. That's some serious. That is some serious throttle response right there. It's like.
Now keep in mind, when I first started riding, I had no intentions of racing. But I did have delusions on having a commuter bike that was good on the road, that I could take on hard enduro trails and motocross here and there on the weekends. The problem was, I didn't know shit about dirt bikes. I did look around and saw that Honda had the CRF 250L and Yamaha had the WR 250R. Both were street legal, both were reasonably priced, and both looked like badass dirt bikes to me. I did go on YouTube and do a little bit of research. I checked a few reviews on both bikes and I didn't see anything negative, so I decided to go for the cheaper Honda CRF 250L. Still, I wanted to get the straight scoop on whether or not the Honda CRF 250L would suit my needs. I wanted to do some hard trail riding, I wanted to do some motocross, and I wanted a bike that I could use to commute to and from work. So I went straight to my local Honda dealership to ask a salesman whether or not it would work. Now keep in mind that I weighed 230 pounds and I was obviously clueless when it comes to dirt bikes. This guy must have saw me coming from a mile away, or he was just as clueless as I was. He just kept reassuring me that the Honda CRF 250L would suit my needs, and so the very next day, I rolled off that lot on my shiny new turd. And I loved that turd for a time. I rode it to work, and not being skilled enough for the harder stuff, I took it on some easy trails just to start out. Eventually, I found my way to the local motocross track where I discovered exactly how bad of a rider I really was. And it would take me a few months before I realized that it wasn't just me. Sure, there is truth to the saying that it's not the bike, it's the rider. But at some point, the limitations of the design of the bike become apparent. Now, for the CRF 250L lovers out there that have had good experiences with their bike, I'm so happy that your experience with this bike is rewarding. But if you can't admit that it's not the best choice for hardcore off-road riding, then you're either lying to yourself or just as delusional as I was. Of course, a good rider could ride any bike well, but I highly doubt that the CRF 250L would be their first choice when it comes to hardcore off-road riding. Anyways, I still had a lot to learn. I still do. But at the time, I believed that the bike was holding me back. It was way too heavy and too gutless. On top of that, the weak, non-adjustable suspension was completely unfit for my weight and the type of conditions I was putting this bike through. I did find some optimism on the internet about how I could make the bike better by modding it with a different exhaust system, respringing the suspension. There was stuff about airbox mods and engine tuning mods. I even tried some of them. But in the end, I didn't want to sink any more money into a bike that I didn't think would ever be responsive enough or light enough for what I wanted to do. Not to mention, I was completely insecure with my ability to turn a wrench and do those mods myself. Did I mention I really didn't know that much about dirt bikes? So basically, modding the bike felt like it was just going to cost more money than it was worth. I started to look for something that was street legal, much more capable off-road, and ready to rock right off the showroom floor. I guess they got me with the slogan "Ready to Race," because that's how I ended up with the KTM 500 EXC, a dual sport bike that was much more capable than the Honda CRF 250L. Now, to compare these two bikes is a little unfair. The KTM costs almost twice as much as the Honda. On the same token though, the KTM was worth it. The KTM 500 EXC was easily much more fun to ride, and it was definitely capable of more than I could ever put it through. Also, believe it or not, it was much more durable and less maintenance heavy than the Honda was. You see, I dropped the Honda several times, and every single time I dropped it, something got bent or broken. The 500 I dropped more times than any dirt bike should ever be dropped, and to its credit, it took it like a champ. I went almost 3 years on the KTM 500 EXC before I had to replace any levers or foot controls. To this day, I loathe my Honda CRF 250L, and it sits next to the trash bins on the side of my house. I would sell it, but I owe more on it than it's worth, so there it sits until I can break even on the deal. Every now and then I take it on a rip down some of the trails that I ride the KTM on, but the bike just feels so underwhelming. Sure, now that I'm a better rider, I can see, with the exception of motocross, that the Honda CRF 250L can pretty much do all of the stuff I originally intended for it. It just doesn't do it as well as the KTM. Now, I've gotten a lot of grief over my views on the Honda CRF 250L, but I stand by my criticism. I believe that the Japanese manufacturers just haven't been keeping up with the European manufacturers when it comes to this class of bike, which is very sad because it allows the European manufacturers to set the market and the limitations on what we as consumers have available to us, and it stifles the innovation that competition creates. Unlike most fanboys, I'm not married to a brand. In fact, I've always wished that the Japanese manufacturers would release something that was actually competitive with the European bikes. Enter Honda's new 450 Dual Sport. Now, initially when I saw the CRF 450 had the letter L appended to it, I immediately wrote it off. I assumed that it would be an overweight, underpowered, overrated pig that would just please the KTM haters out there, but never actually be any serious competition to the Euro bikes. After a little research, it looks like I'm both right and wrong. On paper, the Honda CRF 450L looks much more capable than the Honda CRF 250L ever did. Starting with the suspension, this bike comes with the same adjustable Showa forks and shock and engine as the rest of the 450 line. Now, there were some early reports out there that said the CRF 450L was only going to put out about 25 horsepower, but that's absolutely ridiculous. There's no evidence on Honda's website to support that claim, and it looks like it's just fake news. So I'm going to give Honda the benefit of the doubt. Now, assuming that the suspension and engine are as good as they sound on paper, the only problems I have with this bike are the weight, the price tag, and some smaller issues that I have some questions about. At 289 pounds wet, that's with fuel and oil and ready to go, the Honda 450L is about 40 pounds heavier than the KTM 500 EXC and about 50 pounds heavier than the 350 EXC. Now, this is an apples to apples comparison, as the KTM EXC line are street legal dual sport bikes with pretty similar features to the 450L. It should be noted that this is very light compared to the Honda CRF 250L at 320 pounds and the other Japanese dual sports that exist on the market. For people who won't buy a European bike for whatever reason, probably see this as one for the win column. I see it as a liability. But what really has me baffled about this bike is the price. At over $10,000, the Honda costs as much as the KTMs, which are proven bikes that have been around for a while. I know it sounds like I'm talking bad about the 450L, but I honestly can't wait till there's a demo day where I can get the chance to throw my leg over it and give it a ride. As soon as I get a chance to ride one, I'm going to do a review on it. But until then, there's a lot to look forward to with the upside to this whole situation. If this Honda turns out to be a solid performer despite its weight and what's sure to be a corked engine performance, it's going to put pressure on the Japanese manufacturers, and it just might bring the European manufacturers down a few notches. With all this competition in the market, we as consumers have everything to gain and nothing to lose. So bring it on, Honda, and let's see if Yamaha, Suzuki, and Kawasaki will answer the call. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.